Well, welcome and thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
me. I was just starting to tell everybody about your ambitious plan to be the first woman to row the North Pacific there. And it does take a lot of planning, I'm sure. So let's start with a little bit of background and so people understand, well, why you're not just this crazy woman that's going to go and row the North Pacific. You've done a bit of rowing and sailing in your time. Tell us your story.
Sure. So, in terms of rowing, 7 years ago, I rowed across the Atlantic as part of the Atlantic race, which was then called Woodvale, is now called the Atlantic Challenge. And I did that with a partner, so I wasn't alone in the boat. Prior to that, I had sailed professionally. So I am a licensed captain and a professional sailor. And so that row across the Atlantic was actually my ninth crossing of the Atlantic. So I definitely knew the way. And a few hours after arriving, I sort of knew, I think, that I would do it again. There was something quite magical about being in a boat that close to the water. In fact, it was the very thing that I feared, was that proximity to the water was the thing I ended up loving. I thought, I'd get washed, swallowed by waves or even washed overboard. But the thing that I couldn't have known was how the wildlife in the ocean would react to us being in a rowboat. So unlike race boats or sailboats that I had been in and crossed in before, which make noise, or
Yeah.
output smell, the dolphins, the whales, the wildlife don't know what you are in a rowboat. And so they're insanely curious and actually try to communicate with you. And that really, I could never get tired of that.
Oh, I can imagine. That's just absolutely awesome. A lot of this terrifies me because although I can swim a little bit, I've actually had some accidents in water. So the very thought of being stranded in the middle of the Atlantic has no appeal for me. But what does have an appeal is, of course, that contact with dolphins and whales. That must be just so magical. It must be very peaceful out there. All you've got is the sound of the ocean and the weather.
It is peaceful, but actually the sound of the ocean isn't peaceful. It's constantly moving. It's a sort of churning sound of water that never ends. And in fact, when I step off the boat in my training rows, the thing that sort of I bathe in is silence. And I know that
Interesting.
my friends who've been to the polar regions say the same, because people put on their walls photographs or paintings of ice caps, but an ice cap is far from silent.
Hmm.
It squeaks and groans and cracks and pops, and it's sort of
Yeah.
threatening endlessly. And the ocean, in a way, is the same. It is always a force, and you must respect that force because it can develop into something quite dangerous. But yeah, so that sort of sense of belonging that I discovered with the wildlife. I mean, even last week I was rowing around Catalina, which is an island west of LA, about 30
Hmm.
miles out. And on the backside of it, it's really quite wild, which was a surprise that close to, Los Angeles. But there are no habitation, no lights, and endless amounts of dolphins. And two of them came right up, I mean, a foot from where I was sitting, squeaking away, trying to communicate. And I'm sitting there going, I don't speak dolphin. I don't know what you say, but hi, And, it's an enchanting moment. And I just love that.
You'll have to learn to speak dolphin then if you're going to go for another extended period, Leah. And it is magic, of course, having that connection. Do you get actually to touch them? Do they come close enough that you can reach out to them?
I suppose you could, but out of respect, I don't.
Hmm.
That doesn't appeal to me. But so I realized, I think, somewhere in my Atlantic row that I was going to a place that many people will never go, and I will see and experience things most people will never experience. And therefore, I take that sort of responsibility not lightly. And I say that a day at sea that I don't write about for others to come with me is a day lost. They tend to blur into each other. And so, I'm very diligent about writing, sometimes 500 or even 1,000 words a day about, what is it I'm experiencing? What does that look and feel like to be out there? Not just the hardship of, being wet or cold in a little boat, screw that. Like, that's obviously a choice I have made. I have
Yeah.
myself to blame for that. But the magic part of it, that's my responsibility, I feel, to take everyone with me.
Well, that's wonderful. And you're going to take us with you too, with the help of modern technology, you're going to share your story with us here as a media partner for your journey.
Yes, I'm delighted to do that, with Wisp Sports. I really like your values and what you're standing for. And I didn't know until we started chatting that you have a presence really in all sports, for women in particular. And I think that's just great.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, our mission is to promote women in sport. And we should thank Melanie Cole from UgoWare. UgoWare is, of course, a company that you know well, and I think is going to be partnering with you in some way. I don't want to give too much away there, but I know that is the connection that we had with you. So a special thanks to Mel and UgoWare. And of course, this journey.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Melody.
This journey, this adventure is going to take quite a bit of planning, and it involves building a boat, doesn't it?
Yes, it has already. So in late 2015, I committed to the idea of rowing the Pacific solo and unsported. And, really, that is the leaping point. If you were a bungee jumper, that would be the moment of going, oh my God, I'm going to leap off and I don't know quite what's going to happen next. So it's now 2019. So I've been training or working on this full time since then, with no regrets. I mean, no one ever goes on an expedition or a big voyage and says, I wish we didn't have that extra time. So I've had a couple of years, and a lot of changes have happened to me personally in my life through that process of training. I mean, for one, I've gained almost 30 pounds, and I'm looking to gain another 15. And that metamorphosis alone is quite massive. I mean, I want to gain 50 pounds, said no woman ever, at least not by choice,
And so, now, why do you know, how do you calculate that it needs to be another 15? You've gained so much and now you need to gain another 15. How do you measure that?
Well, no one really knows. All I know from my Atlantic row is that more weight or more body mass is better. It's more cushioning. It's my doctor calls it the movable feast. It's resources for the body. You get less fatigued if you have more strength, and strength isn't just muscle. Strength is bone density. It is fat to some degree. It's the whole gamut. And the bigger I can be at the start, the better, but preferably muscle mass. But yeah. I will lose. Pretty sure I will lose almost everything I have to lose. And of course, the more you have as a resource, the less likely you are to get into bone density.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, isn't it? It takes a lot of planning, and you need that runway, that lead-in time, just to physically prepare for it, I'm sure. Give us a sense of the timeline then. What does that look like, Lia?
So I've spent the last 2 years in the Bay Area, training in San Francisco area. And so that was a real baptism of fire. And there's an expression that if you can sail in San Francisco, you can sail anywhere in the world. And frankly, if you can row in the Bay of San Francisco, you could probably row anywhere in the world. And so I focused on, can I do it first as a question? Before I go and fund this, is like, how do I feel about doing this? And I, in the last 2 years, have basically focused on my confidence and my skill set. And finally, I rowed out the gate and round the Farallon Islands, which, to our knowledge, no one had done since 1892. And that felt like a big achievement.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a much harder sort of challenge than I had ever imagined. When I first heard that no one had rowed around the island since the era of the lighthouse keeper, I was like, right, lay down a challenge. But that's a very tricky area to even sail, with every navigational difficulty that you can throw in. It's on the lip of a continental shelf. There is gradients of water depth. The islands have some kind of upsurge of waves. People have died sailing around them. There is a shark colony. You could just keep adding it. But the bit that really tripped me up was this incredible draw out of San Francisco. The tide, sucks from about 15 to 20 miles out to sea. And so as a little rowboat, it's very hard to break out of that cycle. So that was my first sort of big achievement really with this project. And then my second was Catalina only last week, which should have been a walk in the park, but a storm came along on about day 3, which I knew was coming. And I thought, actually, that's probably more good for me than it is actually just rowing around the island. You know, it's going out there and staying out there and enduring that heavy weather. So what's next is I'm about to start building a boat. In my second year in the Bay Area, I realized that the boat that I have was perhaps not going to be key to my success. It's twice as heavy as the boat that the 2 men rowed successfully. So that's already a disadvantage from the outset. It's also made out of wood and Kevlar and glass as opposed to carbon, and so arguably not typhoon proof. And when the 2 men crossed in 1991 and 2005, typhoons reaching Cat 5 were somewhat rarer, and they're not now. It's almost a given that they would be 4 and 5. And so I don't think it's prudent to go across in the boat that I had. I mean, astronauts don't cross their fingers when they go into space. You know, that's not how we manage risk. And so the last year was spent designing the new boat, and this week we are starting to build it. But I don't have a title sponsor. I did at the beginning of the project, but we parted ways over the decision to build a new boat. And so I am looking for new partners. But in the interim, I decided that what I would really truly like is to make this into something greater than myself. You know, I think if I just rowed the Pacific, it would just be my own little trip, and I should self-fund that. But if I'm looking for partners, then I need to give back. And the way I would like to do that is to go into schools and inspire, you know, young girls in particular, that they can achieve more than they ever imagined, that open the doors of possibility. Because when I was 12, I won a drawing competition to draw a boat of a guy that was sailing around the world. And up until that point, I didn't know that you could sail around the world. And I won the competition. I climbed the ladder to his boat and I met him, and I just couldn't believe it. You know, I listened to the cassette of him sailing through the Southern Ocean, and I wore the t-shirt till it wore out. And for sure, that sent me off on a different tangent in life. You know, because my parents had ordinary jobs. You know, they weren't, you know, they weren't big dreamers or adventurers. And you know, my parents still argue that this life isn't available to me. You know, and I keep forging ahead with it. You know? So I want, you know, young girls to know that there are other alternatives in what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, you're proving this all is possible. And let's look ahead then to the time frame. When do you plan to start? Where are you starting from? And how long do you anticipate this will take, Lia? And then this is one way. And so presumably then you've got to get your boat back again, right?
Well, I'm shipping it to Choshi, Japan, which is kind of like the heel of Japan. So it's like the last part of the peninsula before you're into the ocean. So I'll be leaving there in April next year, so April 2020, and we expect it to take 4 to 6 months. But I am only going to take 5 months worth of food, which adds a edge right from the start.
Yeah, that's
and the
pressure.
the reason for that is that if you take more weight, you are pulling a heavier boat, and if you're pulling a heavier boat, you need more calories because you are doing more work, which means you need more food, and this cycle goes on forever. And so if you have 5 months only, you get on with the job. You know, you wake up that little bit earlier, you row that little bit harder, you know, and everyone holds their breath.
Yeah, I'm sure, including all your family and friends and your support crew too. So how many hours could you typically, and I'm sure it's weather dependent, but on average, would you row a day?
I've found sustainably in training that I can achieve a minimum of 9 hours in one day, and as much as 16 if at a push. So I row in blocks of 3 or 6 and take breaks in between. So a morning session might be 3 hours or 6 hours, depending when I start, and then there'll be an afternoon session and then an evening session. And that's quite sustainable. And the flip from the Atlantic row to the solo rowing is that I won't be rowing necessarily at night, because we've learnt with the team of doctors that are involved with me that the human growth hormone is released at night, and the best chance to recover and repair is at night. You know, you struggle through the night hours to stay awake regardless. So it's not efficient to row at night, sadly, because I love the stars and the moon and rowing in the night, but it doesn't make sense.
Okay, so presumably you have the technology, you know, the systems on board to keep you on course while you take a nap. But how long can you sleep for then? Do you have to time yourself so that you can keep checking the system, or do you put it on autopilot and not have to worry too much if you know, if the weather's being friendly?
Well, it varies hugely. So in a way, training off the coast of California is much harder because you can't sleep for very long. You know, there are all sorts of hazards, including shipping. And so off the coast of California, I sleep in 40-minute bursts or 1 hour 20 if there's nothing on the horizon. But in the ocean, I would expect to sleep maybe in a 4-hour block. But it really depends on the weather. Okay. And I find the boat tends to wake me up. You know, it's a sort of gurgling baby if it needs something. And also another thing that's been fascinating to me in the last year is I've realized that I've honed my ability to use echolocation. And I find this very fascinating. So I was outside the Golden Gate on one of my attempts to row to the Farallones, and I realized that I was hearing the channel marker. And that even while in my bunk with my eyes shut, I was making a judgment on whether we were drifting closer to or away from that channel marker. And that was about 5 miles away. But by the time I got to the row down the California coast, so in June last year, I rowed from San Francisco to Santa Barbara, I woke up and there was a noise and I realized that was a ship, but the ship wasn't on the horizon yet. But it did come from the direction that I expected it to, and it was 15 to 20 miles when I sensed that there was a ship there. And it turns out from my research into this now, because I've become quite fascinated, that we all have this ability, but we just don't use it. And so, yeah, this training for this has taken me in all sorts of curious directions.
Yeah, clearly. That is fascinating. Well, we've got lots of people stop by to say hello, and we have a question here from Betsy Shawcoat. Thanks for watching, Betsy. She says, "Hey, Leah, my daughter wants to know if you can catch fish and eat them to help with your food needs."
That's a great question. So because I am only taking 5 months worth of food, some of my friends are concerned that I really need to learn to fish. And as a sailor, we've often trawled a line, you know, on deliveries home and caught fish, but I was never the one to kill them. I was the one to gut and fillet and cook them. And so I do need to learn to fish, particularly, you know, how do you bring a fish on board a very small boat without, you know, the fish like biting your leg or something dramatic. And so this weekend is actually my first fishing training trip. I'm intending to row to Malibu on Saturday and then back again on Sunday with a sort of fishing session in the early evening and early morning. So check my social media to see how that goes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And obviously it makes sense, I'm sure, you know, if you can catch and gather fish. And now, do you have any cooking? Do you have anything? I mean, I know that watching and following the sailors in, say, the Volvo Ocean Race, that, you know, they have all this freeze-dried food and they have a way of just heating it up so that they do have hot food when they need it. But do you have that?
Well, I wasn't planning to cook at all. In fact, on my training, I don't cook. I just add cold water to the freeze-dried meals and leave it for longer. But obviously, you can't do that with a fish. So I've got a non-stick sort of frying pan and a Trangia stove, which is a Swedish concept. It's basically a little bowl, and in it you pour denatured alcohol. And the reason I've chosen that as my fish cooking stove is because it's resistant to corrosion in every single way. Whereas the jet boils, although they're fantastic, they have very delicate igniting switches, and they do corrode over time. So yeah, we'll see how it goes this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you need to be prepared for this. You could be you know, useful. Mix the menu up a little bit there, because I'm sure freeze-dried food gets a little bit boring. Oh, I've even seen the variations, and of course the snacks that you can take as well, because you need so many. You need carbs, you need protein, and you need, you know, all of those nutrients to keep you going for such a long period. But my question now, when you said that you're planning only to take enough food for 5 months, What happens if you get delayed? Can anybody come and, drop, a care package on your boat from above?
Well, I think I'd probably know in about month 3 how we're doing.
Hmm.
I think I'll just row really hard, and I think I'll also start fishing from the start, so that it's a habit,
Hmm.
and rather than a need, But yeah, I like my 5-month plan. So when I rode down to
Okay.
Santa Barbara in June last year, I took 10 days of food only, which was extremely risky. But of course, rowing down the coast, you could stop in any manner of places. And it took 12 and a half days.
Hmm.
But I did have some food left over from each day. And every time I finished a meal and there were a few mouthfuls left, I zipped it up and kept it for the next day. So I was extremely, a great caretaker of whatever was left,
Love that. Well, we've got a question from Angela Madsen. Angela, thanks for watching. She said, "Hi, Leah. Any plans to come to LB and check out the special mattress I use? I know we spoke about it some time ago. A special mattress now. Well, what's she offering you, Leah?"
Well, hi Angela, is planning to row to Hawaii potentially this year.
Okay.
And so she has a rowboat down the coast from me. I'm up in Marina del Rey. So yeah, Angela, we should catch up. I'll row
Definitely.
down potentially.
Yes, row down and compare mattresses. Well, you mentioned there that obviously there's the financial aspect of this, and you want to be doing it for something bigger than yourself. So sponsorship is welcome. What kind of sponsorship, what kind of campaign would you be looking for to support? Because we know a lot of these adventurers do latch on to something that it's meaningful to them to promote as a campaign and helps them financially to achieve their goals. What do you have in mind at this point, Leah?
So firstly, I just want to mention that we've been putting together in the background a huge education program for 4 to 11-year-olds. And that focuses on science. It's intended either as a solid science week or
Hmm.
as a lesson per week, per semester.
Hmm.
And I'm about to partner with a global education resource company that is going to take this to the next level and translate it into, I don't know, 20 or 30 languages. So that just, makes my heart sing. So that's amazing. And in
That's
fact,
fabulous.
in 2 weeks' time, they're going to make me into a 3D model so that they can make cartoon Leah, which is for little kids. And for the under sort of 5-year-olds, I understand from having met a number of kids at the dock that they don't really grasp, what the Pacific Ocean is, or actually at all what I'm going to do. And so to excite the little ones, I am going to take a baseball from the Yomiuri Giants Stadium in Tokyo and row it across the Pacific and throw it back at the San Francisco Giants Stadium. And so when I told a 6-year-old this, he looked at me and he's like, he obviously didn't care about the rowing, but he's like, "Oh my goodness, I get to follow the baseball on this magical journey far, far out to sea." And I was like, yes, that's exactly right. So there's the education program, and then there's the incredible journey of the baseball. So that's the education side for children.
Hmm.
So to fund the build of the boat, immediately, I am selling slices of it in advance. So I have a background in fine art. My first degree was in sculpture. And so I always envisaged doing this, but not necessarily making it public in advance. But after I row the Pacific, the boat will
Hmm.
be sliced up into 3-inch ring frames, so longitudinal ring frames, to make sort of incredible wall sculptures in homes, in offices, and in schools. And I think that people can buy a slice, and obviously buy a slice of, hopefully, history. And I want those
Yeah.
slices not to tell necessarily my story, but what it has come to represent, which is resilience through difficult circumstances, and determination against what has become a lot of odds, and dogged, unwavering perseverance.
Well, I certainly have all of that, and what a great way to memorialize this as well. So we're going to follow you all the way, Leah, and you're going to be blogging for us. You're going to be doing videos and telling your story, and we're going to post them on the website at wisports.com. We're going to have a page set up just for Leah and her journey, so you can
Thank
follow
you.
us there. And we'll be setting that up in the next few days, because this video will go up there as well. So stay tuned for more coming from Lia in the days, weeks, months to come, as she tells her story of this amazing journey. Lia, thank you very much for stopping by today and saying hello to everybody and telling us what it's all about. And we look forward to continuing with you right here. And you'll stop by on Face to Face. You'll be, as I said, posting things on our website as well and sharing on social media. And just tell everybody where they can follow you on social media.
Yeah, thank you. So all my social media handles are RowLiaRow, which came out of my friends encouraging me on my road to the Farallon Islands. So it's like, RowLiaRow, you know, and I was like, that's brilliant. That's like Run Forest Run, but you know, the RowLiaRow version.
Yes.
So yeah, RowLiaRow, Lia being for Lia. And as you can see from my t-shirt, I'm embracing my terrible fear of sharks.
Okay, cool.
So
it sounds like you've got plenty of time to get friends with the sharks out there. That takes a little bit of courage. So, you know, power to you. And obviously, we want you to stay safe. And we look forward to following you, Lia. So again, the very, very best of luck. But we'll see you back here in the weeks to come and tell your story on the website at wisports.com. So thanks again. And now you're going to go this weekend, did you say, down to Malibu? And you've got to go and look at that mattress too.
Yeah, I have things to do. Yeah, it's about an 18-mile road to Malibu. So yeah, I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, I catch a fish. Absolutely.
All right. Well, yeah. Good luck with that. Good luck with the fishing lessons. And thanks again for stopping by.
Nice to chat to you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye.